All right, so assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, inshallah, we will be continuing today. And guess what? Let's kind of get an idea. So, this is page 281. Let's get an idea of how many and what is left, right? Let's do that. And here we go. Oh, I was actually on it. Here we go. So we did Salat al-Eid. We only have 3 topics. We might actually finish 2 today. So let's try. And then that would actually make the funeral prayer and the washing and shrouding as then our last class. If we do manage to finish these 2 today, then next week will be the last class and we'll be talking about the rulings about the washing and shrouding. But guess what? This might actually be longer than 1 class. It might actually take 2 classes, but it doesn't have to take 2 classes. We might kind of make it like a 3-hour day, and we'll see how that goes, inshallah. That way, we'll finish that one, complete everything, and that would be the end, inshallah, for our Fiqh of Worship class. Okay. So we can get on to that subject. Let's start right there. And this is Salat al-Kusuf. Let's look into that. So when we look at Salat al-Kusuf, what is al-Kusuf talking about? Al-Kusuf is talking about an eclipse. Now that when we speak about an eclipse, we're talking about definitely something that we would basically see in of course, in space. It's basically that's what you have, whether we're speaking about a total eclipse or whether we're speaking about the solar eclipse or a moon eclipse, etc. At the end of the day, it basically takes the same ruling and the same way of prayer. So whether you're calling it Salat al-Kusuf or al-Khusuf, okay, and there are differences of opinions between scholars on which one is the moon eclipse and which one is the solar eclipse or the sun eclipse, and then they'll have these debates between kusuf and khusuf. But regardless, for us, what matters is that the application is really the same. Okay, so of course, with the eclipse, there was a notion back then that different celestial things or different natural things may actually change depending on person that probably is a important person, or a person that is perhaps a celebrity or a king or anything of that sort. And when did that eclipse actually happen? During the time of the Prophet ﷺ. That eclipse happened on the day that the Prophet ﷺ's son Ibrahim had died. Now, of course, the Prophet ﷺ is not an imposter. He could have used that to show them that, see, even the sun is getting an eclipse to mark the sad day of the death of my own son. But he said, no, this isn't true. This has nothing to do and irrelevant with the death of my son. This is just part of the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is just a natural event, has nothing to do with any person, any important figure, whatever it is completely irrelevant, but made that clear that it's irrelevant, but there is a special prayer, as it also is something that is a mark that we have to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power in it. Okay, so some of the ayat were mentioned here in regards to the sun, our relationship with the sun. And let's look at the first one. هو الذي جعلكم الشمس ضياء والقمر نورا وقدره منازل لتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب. ما خلق الله ذلك إلا بالحق يفصل الآيات لقوم يعلمون. Okay. He's the one that created the sun, or the shining light, the sun's shining light, and the light in which it derives the moon, and it determined for it the phases. Okay, so that you may know the number of years and account of time. Allah has not created this except in truth. He details the signs for a people who know. Okay, so what is that supposed to mean? What is the inference? The inference is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, whether we're speaking about the sun and what it is delivering in terms of light, or perhaps the other things that we benefit from it, whether we're speaking about heat, light, etc. So all of that is basically made from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or made by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, وَالْقَمَرَ نُورًا. Notice how he said for Shams, he said ضِيَاء, and for al-Qamar, nur. Diya is something that in itself makes light. Okay, in itself makes light. Al-Qamar nur because it reflects light. And we know the moon surface is basically reflecting light and not making light. But of course, how did Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallam know that? It was basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator. He's the one that informed the Prophet sallam. وَقَدَّرَهُ مَنَازِلَ لِتَعْلَمُوا عَدَدَ السِّنِينَ وَالْحِسَابِ. And he had basically made it into different phases. What is that talking about? That's talking about the moon. You know, when we're speaking about the phases. Let's kind of just a little bit, okay? Let's look at the moon phases, okay? Let's look at that one just really quick, okay? Let's see. Okay, you see that right there? You see these moon phases? Maybe we can write some things on it. Let's look at it, right? So when this would be the full moon, actually it starts from here, okay? Whenever this is it, so this would be the first day of a lunar calendar. Let's say first day of Ramadan, okay? Then this would be the 7th day of Ramadan, okay? And this would be right there, the 14th, the 13th, and the 15th. I'm just going to write 14 and 15 because not always is it full moon on the 13th. Okay. Oh, actually, they started here as a new moon. Okay, you know what? Since they wanted to do it that way, I didn't realize that one, but I actually, okay, here we go. So they wanted this one to be the new moon. Okay, that's okay too. And let's do it. Where? They wanted this one to be the new moon. Okay, this would be the new moon. And this would be the 7th. Okay, and this would be the 14 or 15. Okay, once you're able to see that light. But here's one thing. Sometimes on the 13th as well, it would also be a full moon. Okay, now we're starting to basically reduce again. And what happens on this would be right there is the 23rd. Okay, this is the 23rd, or maybe sometimes the 23rd, sometimes the 22nd, 21st, you know, but generally the 23rd. Okay, and then of course, you know, that would be, you know, mark it as something close to that. Okay, so we're talking about 6 days later, 5 days later. Okay, and then this one would be the 29th or the 30th day, because the moon, the whole month in Islam is either 29 or 30 days. Okay, so we'll just mark this one. Got the 1st, got the 7th, and you got the 13th, 14th on that day, okay, on the full moon. And that way, which one is the sunnah to stand with your hands tied after ruku'? Okay, we'll wait for that question later. Okay, so there we go. So now you could see the 23rd is basically when it's kind of like a half moon, and the 7th when it's like a half moon. Okay, when it's a full moon, it's basically going to be the 13, 14, or 15 of that lunar month. Okay, and then of course, if it's going to be like a crescent, it's either going to be the 1st, okay, or it's going to be basically this one, or it's going to be closer to the end. Okay. Okay, so this would be, look at the difference. The crescent is this side, and this crescent is this side. Okay, so now you know why sometimes they would get confused whether it's a new moon or whether it's still the same month. You see, this is why they get confused, because they're looking at it, and sometimes it gets dark, okay, and then they can't really see whether this already started or not. So that's why they get into, well, let's continue since we couldn't see it. And the experts will actually tell you that they cannot see it. In other words, it's not possible to see it with the naked eye. That is this new moon. Okay? That is this new moon, that you can't see it. And sometimes it is so small that it would be impossible for you to see it with your naked eye. Okay, so it'd be possible for countries on the probably on another side, but impossible for the countries on this side. So the experts would basically tell you and explain it to you. Okay, let's continue right there. Enough with that one. Okay, and let's get to those ayat. قال تعالى ومن آياته الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر لا تسجدوا للشمس ولا للقمر واسجدوا لله الذي خلقهن إن كنتم إياه تعبدون. And from the signs, and amongst his signs, are the night and day and the sun and moon. Do not prostrate to the sun or to the moon, but prostrate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created them. If it should be him that you worship. If it should be him. I don't know if that's actually, excuse my English because it kind of sounds different than the Arabic. Okay. Now, okay, so let's talk about Salat al-Kusuf. Do we have to pray Salat al-Kusuf? Or what is it? So Salat al-Kusuf, they said Sunnah mu'akkada. But there's actually another thing that other scholars would say another word for it. They would say Fard Kifaya. Okay, what does that even mean? There are two kinds of obligations. There's one kind of obligation that's a communal obligation. Let's call it communal obligation, okay? There's the other kind, which is an individual obligation. Wait a minute, so what's the difference? The other one is called Fard Ayn, okay? Got Fard Ayn. What does that mean? That's an individual, okay, obligation. Okay, so what does that even mean? Well, when something is communal, there are certain obligations that the society must communicate with one another, and a group of people within the Muslim community must be doing it. If no one does that communal obligation, then everyone is going to be held accountable for that, and every single individual is going to be held accountable for it. Fard Ayn is simply an obligation that is obligatory upon each and every single individual. What does that look like? Every single person is obligated to do that prayer, or every single person is obligated to do that obligation, regardless of anyone else doing it or not. It's you, whether you're the king, minister, person in bed, whatever it is, this is an obligation that you are required to do as an individual. This is an individual thing, okay? And yet, when you say sunnah mu'akkada, that actually looks different. What is sunnah mu'akkada? So you have sunnah and you have a sunnah mu'akkada. So a sunnah mu'akkada would mean that the Prophet ﷺ had done it, and rarely missed it, and it is something that the Prophet ﷺ had done it, and it was something that many Sahaba had even witnessed, that this was done is in this form and on this day and in this way. Okay, that would be a sunnah mu'akkada. So similar things to sunnah mu'akkada would be just like the sunnah before Fajr prayer. That's a sunnah mu'akkada. Okay, before Fajr prayer. The sunnah after Maghrib, that's a sunnah mu'akkada. Sunnah mu'akkada. Okay, let's see. باتفاق العلماء, all scholars agreed, and they unanimously agreed that it is a sunnah mu'akkada, that it's a sunnah, and certainly it's Here they said, look at the word that they used. They said stressed act of sunnah. Most books don't actually use this wording. They would say highly recommended. Most books that you will find will use the word highly recommended compared to recommended to mean just the general word of sunnah, highly recommended. Okay, so what's the evidence on that? The evidence is that the Prophet ﷺ, when, of course, let's say al-Shams and the sun and the moon are basically just signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to bring fear within us. So when you hear, for example, a thunder, that's to just get us scared? No, because we already know that a thunder can be sending thousands of voltage on you. And if you were to get struck by lightning, okay, especially for the people living in Minnesota, this is common. If you were to get struck by lightning, you could actually die right on the spot. Right on the spot, boom, bang, right there. Okay, and that's why in Minnesota, for example, they would be giving you these instructions on not to play whenever you would see lightning, etc., not to play outside, not to play near a tree, not to play in water, not to be near those areas that are open spaces and you would be the only one there. Because if you get struck by lightning, okay, you could actually die right on the spot, because this is like thousands of voltages right there just hitting you and actually right on the spot burning you, literally burning you with one strike. And certainly, of course, with that lightning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether we're hearing the lightning, we would make the dua. سبحان الذي يسبح الرعد بحمده والملائكة من خيفته. That's the sunnah. سبحان الذي, let's write that down, right? Let's write it down. سبحان الذي, maybe we could actually bring it up right there, right? Let's go look at it right there and actually get that up, okay? And سبحان الذي يسبح الرعد بحمده والملائكة من خيفته. This is it. This is it. سبحان الذي يسبح الرعد بحمده والملائكة من خيفته. All the glory be to the Lord Almighty, who the thunder would praise him and glorify his praise. And the angels would glorify him, of course, of fearing him. Okay, so just by seeing that, you would basically make that dua. So that's the same thing when we see the different signs, perhaps, that surround us. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا نُرْسِلُ بِالْآيَاتِ إِلَّا تَخْوِيفًا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send the different ayat, would send the different things basically happening around us, takhweefa, in order to bring fear. Why bring fear? Why not happiness? No, there are certain things that are to bring happiness and other things are to bring fear, because fear is the best tool for discipline, to get us afraid, to make us basically fear is to get us on track of things. We're afraid of getting an illness, so we start working out. We're afraid of perhaps losing our house, so we would basically work harder. We're afraid of maybe the fitna that surrounds our children, will basically pay more money to put them in Islamic schools. We're afraid of perhaps maybe homelessness, will probably, strive to perhaps get a better job in a hardworking job, etc. All of these different things, they're basically the different fears act as the biggest motive. It's the biggest motive for us. Okay, let's see. On the day when the Prophet ﷺ, of course, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was an eclipse in his lifetime. Everyone basically went to the masjid in fear, and the Prophet ﷺ basically took his garment and went, and then he informed them that al-kusuf is a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that he would basically through these signs basically let people see the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that he also informed them that this could be one of those different signs basically that may bring in a punishment for the people. And then he basically would order them to make the prayer and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for one, just a general invocation, and two, asking for forgiveness, and three, donate and make charity, okay, and donate in charity, and also freeing slaves, and all a number of different good pious deeds that they should be doing, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could remove the effect of the people. Okay, so this is extremely important to keep in mind, that we would see it as a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but also making that dhikr as a way to seek relief. But here's the thing. I mean, we know that astronomers will tell you when there's going to be a solar eclipse or a moon eclipse, and by that, even the timing and the date and the exact minute and the exact second and the exact year, etc. And they'll tell you all of that. And does that mean that the people are going to be on those days basically worse, and then therefore they would make the dua? No, it's not that they would be worse, but the Prophet ﷺ was teaching us to take those times when, whether we're getting a thunder, whether we're getting probably a flood, or probably getting natural disasters and what we would call natural disasters and all of that, that we should take it as seriously, and we should consider relating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and consider going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to basically remember that he controls all these powers that surround us. And you, as a small being within this whole galaxy, you should consider and remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power basically surrounds you from every single corner. Now that you recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's powers surrounds you in each and every single corner, you recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that you should seek forgiveness from, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically the one that you should turn to whenever things go wrong, that you should turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, just a random thing. Okay. I had a phone call. Maybe this is just to wake up the ladies, okay? I had a phone call. The sister said that her husband got married to a second wife, and she's extremely sad about it. And she was feeling insecure and wants to seek divorce. Okay, so I want to seek divorce. I'm not feeling safe. I need to leave and all of that. And she said, I can't wrap it around my head that it's something that I can be safe with. Okay, so here's the thing. When we look at safety, we don't, whether security, safety, provision, etc., as a Muslim, we don't see security, provision, health. You go on and on with all those different things that you basically get around you. We don't relate it to people. And we don't relate it to things. Like I have the rizq. Oh, sorry about that. About that, everybody. So when we speak about security, risk, and everything that surrounds us, it's not dependent, not on, let's say, the job that we're getting, or perhaps the president, or perhaps this person or that person. All of that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But these things are tools to it. So to feel secure and to feel happy is not dependent on, for example, this person, but we don't rush. That's why we don't rush in making those decisions and say, okay, I don't feel happy, let me get out. But you put in the effort, and you evaluate later on. And if things, I guess, if this man failed to prove that he's competent for this polygamous relationship, then in that situation, I would say, you know what, you would have all the right. He proved incompetent for this. He basically went for it, and he wasn't competent. He wasn't fit for it. And in that situation, I would tell you, okay. But to just feel insecure, okay, to just feel insecure and make those decisions based on impulsive relationships, based on impulsive reaction, is definitely not a wise act and not a wise way of making any decision making. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered us to have a wali, basically help us in those times that we need, let's say, a solid decision that is not based on emotions. Sometimes we just need that moment to not let our emotions basically control us. Okay, how did we get there? I want you to look at, the different things when we see al-kusuf, for example. That's one way to show us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is basically the power behind everything that you see around you, that He's the magnificent power, that He basically controls all this power. And that's just seeing a sense of it. This isn't the complete thing. This is just to sense some of that power, whether we're talking about some of that power in sound, or some of that power in the effect that it might have, and whether in the magnificence and the how big it is, all of that. That's basically part of things. One of the most beautiful sciences, and I'm sure every single, it's part of our instinct perhaps, that we just always would love to learn about space, astronomy. I'm sure it fascinates each and every single one of us. Why? Because it's this area that our brain, and especially if you grew up on a ranch, or you grew up away from the city, you get to see more of the sun, the moon, the stars, and your mind is always just questioning what's out there. What's happening? Why is it there? How far is it? How big is it? What are the phases? Why does it look like that? All of these questions are questions that are part of our instinct to ask. Okay. And subhanAllah, once we ask these questions, it gets us to, this is tafakkur fi khalqillah. This is basically pondering in the different creation that surrounds us and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created. And from that, we basically get motivated to relate to recognizing the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how great Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. It's something that we don't really know for all that detail, but we can look at some signs of those basically in the world around us. So even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He didn't really tell us much about His essence, but He told us to see the implications of His power, the implications, just to get an idea, because it wouldn't be something that we could at all imagine, because it's beyond our capacity to imagine. But He would tell us, okay, now you see that moonlight? Yes, I'm the one that makes it. You see that sunlight? Yes. Well, I'm the one that created its heat. I'm the one that made it. and you see life and death right before you. Somebody gets a life and the other person loses their life. I'm the one that's behind giving them life, and I'm the one that's behind giving them death. You see the eclipse, you see all how things function around you, from the stars, from the sun, from everything. Yes, I'm the one that makes it. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course. And so in al-Kusuf, there's basically this reminder. It's basically a warning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directed at the people to basically go over and just return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and follow his right path. In other words, you could say that he controls all of that, then there's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to go where you would be protected away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he controls the universe. Okay, so during Jahiliyyah, they used to have these thoughts, and of course these legends, that whenever a great person dies or a great person is born, that it would basically, an eclipse would happen. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ had shown them that this is irrelevant and completely irrelevant to people's lives, whether it's a magnificent person or whether it is not. And that's when the Prophet's son dies, basically Ibrahim, and the people were saying, well, this is because the Prophet's son had died. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taught the Prophet to say, Inna shamsa wal qamara ayatan. The Prophet said, the Prophet then said, the sun and the moon are two signs amongst the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا ينكسفان لموت أحد ولا لحياته. فإذا رأيتم ذلك فافزعوا إلى ذكر الله وإلى الصلاة. Said, so they do not eclipse because of the death or the life of anybody. So when you see that, seek refuge with the remembrance of Allah and perform prayer. Okay, in another hadith that is also authentic, he said, فَادْعُوا اللَّهَ وَصَلُّوا حَتَّى يَنْجَلِي. Invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and perform prayer until the eclipse is all cleared. Let's see, in another hadith that was narrated by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, he said, هذه الآية التي يرسل الله لا تكون لموت أحد ولا لحياته ولكن يخوف الله بها عباده فإذا رأيتم شيئا من ذلك فافزعوا إلى ذكر الله ودعائه واستغفاره. Okay, let's say that these signs which Allah sends do not occur because of the death or the birth of anybody, but by them Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns his servants. So when you see anything thereof, resort to remembering Allah Almighty, invoking him and asking for his forgiveness. Okay, so what is that supposed to tell us? Letting us know that not to get fooled by different things. Well, that also is to tell us that all this, what do they call it? Horoscopes, that those are fake. The horoscopes, they don't change and they don't have an effect on your life. The horoscopes, not because, I don't know, the scorpion or whatever, these things that they would imagine and think that they basically have a connection on somebody's life or something that might actually happen, and that if this person is born on that day and he meets with another person, that this is what's going to happen, and that they're probably going to be disappointed on this day, probably going to lose their job on that day, probably going to do a good fortune on that day or whatever it is. This is completely irrelevant and is haram to believe in. It's so weird that we would have some people actually say, well, I've got an evidence that proves that you're wrong. وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ. How is that proving anything of the horoscopes? It's actually making an oath that is sama basically has al-buruj, meaning that there are certain paradigms in the skies, basically certain ways that the stars are basically designed in. It has nothing to do with how that design is related to your life. There's nothing of that sort whatsoever. But it's so sad that when you have people that first, they don't know Arabic, proper Arabic, even though they're Arab, but sometimes, they don't even know the Sunnah, then they end up really misunderstanding Quran and Sunnah, and they end up making all these messes, even in the interpretation. It's like, have your datas right. It's so sad when we actually see even right now, Arabic Muslims are actually confusing the evidences. And right now, we're seeing confusion, even a lot more than before. I used to think, to be honest, when I was an undergrad, they were teaching us about Shahrur, and they were our professor, Allah yarda anhu ya Rabbi, he was teaching us about a lot of the misconceptions out there. And I said, who would ever believe in these misconceptions? I mean, it's so obvious. Why are they teaching us how to respond to it? And I was totally wrong. I was totally wrong. These misconceptions and these people making these misconceptions during our times, for example, okay, you actually had certain very rich countries, Muslim countries, that are actually adopting these people. And believe it or not, when I was doing my master's, I was actually working on the neoconservatives and their portrayal of Islam and Muslims and all of that. And they were actually suggesting that they would adopt these people that would have Muslim names. And they did mention Adnan Ibrahim, they did mention Shahrur, they did mention Khalid Abul Fadl, as taking them as these figures that would replace the famous figures that would act as the traditional Muslims. So they wanted to replace, let's call them these figures that would have a Muslim name, and then they would have interpretation for the religion where hijab is not obligatory, alcohol, I mean, it's a personal choice, salah, I mean, just have to be inclusive. So basically the ideology of universalism, and that there's no difference between a Jew and a Christian and a Muslim. It's just the way that you might relate, but it's all the same. Basically, that what they would right now proselytize as the Abrahamic agenda, really. Okay. And you had UAE, you had certain rich countries basically adopt these figures in an attempt to replace the Islam that is based on Quran and Sunnah. This is real. And they would spend billions of dollars, and whether it's in making podcasts or probably videos, movies, you name it, they'll basically spend billions of dollars just to make something that might indoctrinate the new Muslims in a new form of Islam. So just keep that one in mind, that in order to be protected from all of that, it's not enough to say, well, I know the truth, no need, but no, you actually have to work on one, inviting people to learn the Islam, or to learn Islam from its resources and not from those, I would call them secondary resources. Secondary resources are basically perhaps, I watch Reels, or I probably, read an article here and there. No, you really need to learn the Islamic resources. You need to go back to those scholars to learn Islam, and not necessarily sandwiched in fast food information, because those fast food information, that's not giving you the nutrients that is necessary for you to be strong in facing all those misconceptions. All right, let's continue. All right, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then revealed the ayah وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ اللَّيْلُ وَالنَّهَارُ وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ لَا تَسْجُدُوا لِلشَّمْسِ وَلَا لِلْقَمَرِ وَاسْجُدُوا لِلَّهِ الَّذِي خَلَقَهُنَّ إِن كُنتُمْ إِيَّاهُ تَعْبُدُونَ. And of his signs are the night and the day and the sun and the moon. Do not prostrate to the sun or to the moon, but prostrate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who created them, if it should be him that you worship. Okay. And of course, when we're looking at this ayah in Surah Fussilat, what is that supposed to tell us? That from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ash-shams, the sun and the moon, but of course, we're not supposed to be prostrating to the actual sun or the moon, but we would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, don't relate and think of the moon, even though it's a reason why you would get sunlight, for example, or light or day, or the moon, even though basically the disappearance, at least, of that sun on that hour basically brings in the moon being visible to you. It's not that it wasn't there, it just became visible to you. Okay, so what does that mean? That's basically to let us know that a rizq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that controlling life, controlling everything around you is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Same thing. If we look at, for example, rizq is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not the job. The job is a mean, but it's not what makes rizq. The husband is basically a mean to security, but he is not the one that grants security. So in other words, we relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We redirect our vision in how we read the world around us, and that we would see that the rizq, life, death, and how security and how everything functions in this universe, that we see it, that it's basically from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not worship anything else. In kuntum iyyah ta'budun. So when do we actually do Salat al-Kusuf? So Salat al-Kusuf basically starts from the time when the actual eclipse begins to basically appear. That's why the Prophet ﷺ basically said, فَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ فَصَلُّوا. In other words, if you see anything of that sort, then go and pray. In another hadith, إِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ شَيْئًا مِنْ ذَلِكَ فَصَلُّوا حَتَّى يَنْجَلِي. In another hadith in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, if you see anything of that, perform prayer until it clears. So we would basically do the whole prayer for a couple hours until it clears. Okay. Of course, Salat al-Kusuf, there is no makeup for Salat al-Kusuf. You can't make up Salat al-Kusuf because Salat al-Kusuf only is, so the eclipse prayer is only when there's an eclipse, not another time. So if you basically overslept it, sorry, you missed a sunnah mu'akkada that rarely happens right there. So in other words, that would be a very special thing to commemorate in ibadah. Okay, so in that situation, now that you skipped it, there's no makeup for it, and therefore we would basically have to connect and relate to that. So, you know, look at the news and know when an eclipse is about to happen. How do we pray Salat al-Kusuf? So Salat al-Kusuf is really prayed in 2 rak'ahs. Look at this one. Okay, 2 rak'ahs. The recitation would be in loud recitation. In the first rak'ah, you would read al-Fatiha, and then you would read a long surah, like a surah al-Baqarah or something of that sort, and then make a long ruku', and then rise from the ruku', say Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa lakal hamd, and then read al-Fatiha again. Did we make a sujood? No, we didn't. Not yet. And then rise again, read the Fatiha, then read a long surah, perhaps maybe Surah Al-Imran, Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah Al-Nisa. Can I read while holding the Quran? Yes, you can. Okay. Yes, you can. You can read holding the Quran or even holding your phone, as long as you turn off the notifications and they don't keep distracting you. Okay. And then you would basically read, continue to reading, and then you would make a long ruku'. Okay. And this ruku' is a little slightly shorter than the first time you did it. Then you would rise again and say, سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا ولك الحمد حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا في ملء السماوات وملء الأرض وملء ما شئت من شيء بعد. Okay, so what does that even mean again? Okay, this one actually means Allah listens to the one who praises him. O our Lord, all praise is due to you, many good and blessed praises. The praise with which is filled which filled the heavens and the earth, and with which is filled anything that you desire after this. Okay, but what if I don't know this one? You can carry a pamphlet, or you can carry a paper and actually look at it. That's okay too. Okay, you can, or an iPad, for example, and actually go over it. What if I don't know the words in Arabic? You can read it in English. Read the actual words in English? No, meaning reading, as you would say, S-A-S-A-M-I-A, write it basically in English writing. Okay, because it's within the prayer. You want your prayer, hey, we're making a very long prayer. Want to make sure that it's actually as accurate as possible, because we definitely don't want it to be void. Okay, so yeah, we're trying to make it as accurate as possible. Okay, then of course they would make a long sujood. Okay, but the sujood would be long, but when we would sit between the two sajdas, it wouldn't be long. Okay, and then they would stand up for the second rak'ah. Okay, and then what are they going to do? Basically, same thing. They're going to be reading al-Fatiha, going to be reading after al-Fatiha a long surah. They're going to be making a ruku' again, long ruku', and they're going to be standing up again, and they're going to be making the Fatiha again. Am I making sujood yet? No. Fatiha again, and a long surah again, and then you're going to be then continuing after finishing that. Then you're going to be making basically another ruku', and then Sami Allahu liman hamida. Going to be making then two sajdas. Okay, wait a minute. Can we watch a little video, because I'm kind of confused? Okay, let's see. We're going to do Salat al-Kusuf right there, because we want to see it. I know we got confused, and we're going to get a video to actually help us see how it's prayed. Let's do this one. Yeah, we want something like super simple and with no confusion, something as simple as letting kids know how it's done. Okay, so here we go. We're going to have this cartoon thing actually do it. Okay, here we go. So what are we doing? We are basically, okay, my sweetheart, you're going to go faster. Okay, let's do it this way. Oh man, is it not allowing me? I'm going to play back speed, and I'm going to make it even faster. Here we go. This girl's speaking in so fast, right? Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. So what did they just do? Let's do it this way. Saying Allahu Akbar, that's the beginning. Okay, and then of course, what are they doing? Now, oh, I guess he went too fast. Hold on. I'm gonna correct that playback, that speed. Okay, because he's going too fast. Okay, let's do it this way. What are we doing? Hold on. Let's do it again. Come on, my friend. Okay, we're making Allahu Akbar. Okay, oh dear. Well, what we're supposed to be making after Allahu Akbar, reading the Fatiha, and then reading another long surah. Like I said, you could use the Quran and actually do that. Okay, and then we're going for ruku', and it's going to be a long ruku'. And of course, with the long ruku', okay, with the long ruku', what are you doing? You're basically Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim, Subhana Rabbi al-Azim. You could do that. And then, of course, we're rising again after that, and we're doing exactly the same thing. What are we doing? The Fatiha again. Did we make the sujood? No, we didn't. The Fatiha again, and another long surah, basically. The long surah, like I said, you can have the Quran in front of you and actually read from it, or you can basically put your phone in your hand and actually read from it, as long as you don't make too many movements. Okay, so if we, here we go. So what did he do? He read a long surah. Yes, can he read more than one long surah? Yes, he can. What if I don't know these long surahs and I want it to be perfect? So if you wanted perhaps to keep on repeating Qul Huwallahu Ahad, maybe that's okay too. You want to repeat it, I don't know, that would equal to probably 3,000 times. That's okay too. Okay, now what is he doing? Basically a long ruku', which, so what is the amount of long ruku'? We're talking about maybe 15, 20 minutes of ruku'. Yes, but you know what? I might actually get dizzy. You don't have to do it that long. Unless you're in a jama'ah, then you're going to be with the jama'ah. But can I use it? Can I sit on a chair if, you know, standing for, I don't know, for that long time is too long for me and my back can't handle those long standings? You definitely can. You can sit down. What applies to a normal prayer or the average prayer basically would apply to Salat al-Kusuf as well. You could pray it sitting down if you can't stand up. What if, no, I am capable of standing, but I'm just not comfortable standing for that long. It's permissible to sit down, even if you're just not comfortable, because at the end of the day, this is a sunnah and not a fard. Okay, so for voluntary prayers, whether we're speaking about voluntary prayers as Sunan al-Rawatib, or whether we're speaking about Salat al-Kusuf. Okay, so what did he do? He basically did his ruku'. It was a long ruku', and then got up and said, Sami Allahu liman hamida, and made that dua that we talked about earlier. Okay, but you know, the other sister, she couldn't make that dua because she didn't memorize it. That's okay. She just said, Sami Allahu liman hamida, and went silent. That's okay too. Okay, so what are we going to do? Now we're going to go, since we did 2 rak'ahs, we did 2 ruku'. Now we're going to go for that sujood. Okay, I'm going to make a long sujood. Okay, he made a very long sujood, but of course, because it's basically playback speak is fast. Okay, long sujood. And with this long sujood, we're talking about what, 15, 20 minutes of sujood? Yes, 15, 20 minutes of sujood. What are we going to do? What are we going to say? Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. Or you can make other adhkar. Sajada wajhi alladhi khalaqahu wa sawwarahu wa shaqqa sam'ahu wa basara. You can make those adhkar as well. Okay, but what if I didn't memorize it? Just say Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. What if I didn't even memorize Subhana Rabbi al-A'la? Okay, and certainly if I'm making sujood, I won't be able to say it. Okay, just making the sujood, if you don't know how to say Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, just make the sujood. Just do it in let's say physically, okay? And inshallah, you'll learn how to say the other words later, okay? So we're making a long sujood, and then we're getting up, sitting down, but the sitting down is not going to be too long, okay? Sitting down between the 2 sajdas. Did I skip that too fast? Okay, sitting down between the 2 sajdas isn't going to be that long, okay? Let's see, do it again. Uh-oh. What happened? Hold on, I think you went too fast. Okay, here we go. This is a sajda. Okay, this one, that wouldn't be too long. Just Allahu Akbar Rabbi Ghfirli, and then going for a long sujood again. So we're looking at 15, 20 minutes sujood. Okay, and there we go. Now 15, 20 minutes sujood. Getting up. Now this would be technically the 3rd rak'ah, by the way, but in the common counting, it would be considered like it's a 2nd. Wait. How did you get there? Because remember, every single rak'ah is actually containing 2 rak'ahs. Remember that? Because he would stand up, Allahu Akbar, and then read the Fatiha and a long surah, and then Allahu Akbar, make the ruku', and then get up again and make another Fatiha and a long surah, and then Allahu Akbar. Now make a second, the 2nd ruku' already. Did they make the sujood for those? No, he didn't. Now he's making the sujood for that. Okay, so that's why. So every single rak'ah basically has 2 rak'ahs. Okay, every single rak'ah basically has 2 rak'ahs with basically 2 sajdas. Okay, so why is it like that and not different? Because the whole object is to keep you away from staring at the eclipse. Okay, That's why you're making long sujood, long ruku', and you are busy doing that dhikr on that moment that the eclipse is basically happening in. That's what you're doing. Okay, so now the same thing, basically as the second rak'ah. Here we go. Reading the Fatiha and basically doing a ruku', standing up again, and doing a Fatiha again, reading a long surah, then doing another ruku', then getting up, Sami Allahu liman hamida, now going for a long sujood, Rabbi ghfirli, or Allahu Akbar, and then basically that's it. Okay, so that was basically, making Salat al-Kusuf in short. Okay, now here's one thing. Salat al-Kusuf, you could see, let's look at this narration and see what Sayyidah Aisha had basically said about Salat al-Kusuf and how the Prophet ﷺ, had done it. Let's see. So the Sayyidah Aisha had narrated that that Shams when during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, there was an eclipse, a sun eclipse, and he went to the mosque and the people aligned behind him. He pronounced takbir and prolonged the recitation of the Quran, and then said the takbir again, performed a prolonged bowing, then meaning that ruku'. Then he lifted his head and said, Allah listens to the one who praises him. He then did not prostrate, but stood up and recited a prolonged recitation again, basically, but shorter than the first one. He again pronounced takbir, then performed a prolonged bowing, but shorter than the first one, and then said, after rising from bowing, Allah listens to the one who praises him. O Lord, all praise is due to you. Then he prostrated, and then he did the same in the second rak'ah. Then he completed 4 bows and 4 prostrations. The sun eclipse had cleared before he finished the prayer. Okay, let's see. سين لغة عربية أن الشمس خسفت على عهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فخرج رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقام وكبر وصف الناس وراءه فاقترأ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قراءة طويلة فركع ركوعا طويلا ثم رفع رأسه فقال سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا ولك الحمد ثم قام فاقترأ قراءة طويلة هي أدنى من القراءة الأولى ثم كبر فركع ركوعا طويلا هو أدنى من الركوع الأول ثم قال سمع الله لمن حمده ربنا ولك الحمد ثم سجد ثم فعل في الركعة الثانية مثل ذلك حتى استكمل 4 ركعات و4 سجدات وانجلت الشمس قبل أن ينصرف. You could see this hadith is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. So now this is right there going into all the details, and it's explaining exactly what happened and exactly how he prayed it. Okay, so one thing, can I pray it alone, and what is the sunnah in that regards in terms of praying it alone? So in general, the sunnah is to actually pray it in congregation. That's the sunnah, to pray it in congregation in jama'ah. Okay. But it is permissible that the person would pray it as individuals, exactly like the rest of the voluntary prayers. Yet praying it in a congregation is better. There is a sunnah as well that the imam would basically give a short or basically a word after Salat al-Kusuf, okay, and basically warn them from keeping away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or even not seeing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing them, etc., and all of that. So basically just give a short reminder about the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and order them to frequently do istighfar, to frequently do dua, and etc. And that's basically the imam's duty, to remind the people to do that. Okay, let's see. In the other hadith, basically in the Sahih, that the Prophet ﷺ انصرف وقد انجلت الشمس فخطب الناس فحمد الله وأثنى عليه وقال إن الشمس والقمر آيتان من آيات الله لا ينكسفان لموت أحد ولا لحياته فإذا رأيتم ذلك فادعوا الله وكبروا وصلوا وتصدقوا. Okay, that was a straightforward hadith, basically. Let's see, the Prophet ﷺ came to the people after the sun became visible again, after the eclipse, and delivered a sermon in which he praised Allah and extolled him. Then he said, the sun and the moon are two signs amongst the signs of Allah. They do not eclipse on the death of or birth of anyone. So when you see the eclipse, invoke Allah, pronounce takbir, perform prayer, and give charity. Okay. So what about if the prayer actually finishes before the eclipse happens? Can we just turned out that it's not done yet? What do we do? So basically, you don't redo the prayer, okay? And you if let's say the eclipse basically happens, but then I guess someone was saying, oh, guess what? Everything's all set. The eclipse is all done. Should we speed up the prayer and basically read shorter surahs to finish the prayer? Yes. Okay. And in that situation, you would basically continue the prayer. You don't just end it and it's like, oh, well, it's done, and just leave the prayer. No, you basically then continue the prayer, but what do? You basically just shorten it, meaning you don't read the long surahs and long sajdas and long ruku'. No, you just basically, it's like, okay, well, I'll just right now conclude it, basically. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تُبْطِلُوا أَعْمَالَكُمْ, and don't void your good actions. So the Prophet ﷺ, it was said that he would continue until the eclipse is clear. So therefore, we would just learn that one, that as long as that happens. Okay, let's see. My laptop's gonna die. This is what I call a laptop eclipse. There we go. We got it. Okay. So Ibn Taymiyyah, let's see what he said. And he was saying that the eclipse may sometimes be longer than on other days than other days. So in other words, we would basically pray based on the amount of eclipse and what happens. So if we had, let's say, a short eclipse, then in that situation, we wouldn't necessarily have to make the prayer basically long. So in other words, in some full eclipse, yes, the longest eclipse prayer that I had prayed, I must admit, I think my back was about to split. Oh my God, I still remember. It was in Masjid al-Aqsa, okay? And yes, we did actually finish, was Surah al-Baqarah, Surah Ali Imran, and Nisa, al-Ma'idah, al-An'am. Was it that long? Up until al-An'am. It was up until al-An'am. That's how, yeah. And the reciter did actually, read in tartil, not al-hadr. Okay, so it wasn't too fast. It was basically taking enough time to read. And I will tell you, it was the longest standing ever. And I must admit, I was at the time maybe 21 years old, but I think my back is the back of an 80-year-old. I couldn't handle standing up, but the standing was literally just so hard to actually stand and just have yourself bent in a certain way, and as much as I can, but yeah, if you're not used to it, it's definitely going to be a lot of back work, especially that you have your neck in a certain position, your back in a certain position, your hand in a certain position. You don't want to do frequent moves. It's a lot of work. Okay, it's a lot of work. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it. Okay, so if we're talking about, let's say, a third eclipse, a long eclipse, a short eclipse, you would basically, let's say, shorten or prolong the prayer for as dependent on how long or short the eclipse basically was. Okay. And that's basically Salat al-Kusuf in details. Any questions about Salat al-Kusuf? I'd be happy to hear it. All right, everybody. Should we go for Salat al-Istisqa or should we do this next week? Do it next week? Everybody is silent. Okay.
No, next week, good.
Next week, تكرم عينك. So what we'll do.
So not mix between two topics.
Okay, fair enough. So we'll do, inshallah, Salat al-Istisqa next week. Let's see some of the questions here. Which one is sunnah? To stand with your hands tied after ruku', such as standing before ruku' or leaving your hands. There are actually different narrations, so I wouldn't necessarily be too particular about that one. Different narrations and different madhab in that regards. Next week, please. Inshallah, we'll do it next week. Go ahead, Sister Samira. You had a question, dear.
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
A couple of questions, Sheikha. Number one, I wanted to know with Salatul Khusuf, Sunnat Muqaddah. So if we are not in the masjid, then we should do it at home.
You can do it at home, certainly.
By ourselves. Okay. And it's highly recommended. If it's Muqaddah, then that means it's highly recommended.
Oh, highly recommended. Absolutely.
Well, it's not commonly done, though, at least not in the subcontinent. Very rarely done.
They actually do it in the masajid. They would make those announcements. You just have to look up. Alhamdulillah, people are a lot more aware of it than before.
Yes.
And people are usually excited about it. It's like, okay, it's not something that you would usually do. And, people are out of curiosity can sometimes come to the masjid and just out of curiosity, they're like, I don't know how to pray it. We'll be like, don't worry. You're gonna say and you're gonna learn how to do it. It's gonna be really simple, really easy, nothing hard about it. Just, just follow along. If you don't know how to do it, just join everybody and do what they're doing. That's it.
Yes, and then you learn how long it is.
Absolutely. Exactly. You'll learn how long it is. You'll enjoy the dhikr. You will also get to, I guess, hear that dhikr and be around for a long time to actually engage in that dhikr and reciting those long surahs.
Yeah, my husband was many, many years ago when we had gone for Umrah when we were very young. He had gone to the Haram and he just joined for the first time in his life, had no idea. And it was actually Imam Shurem when he was a young man and he'd just come into the Haram and he led that and it was so long and he came back and he said, as you said, it was just too long for him. He was also young then. So yeah, it's an amazing prayer. I've done it in Medina. Alhamdulillah.
Oh, wow. Okay. No, I've done it in the Masjid al-Aqsa. Well, there were other times that I had done it in Minnesota, but the longest one was in the Masjid al-Aqsa. Nothing beat that.
Yeah, I'm sure, mashallah. And also two more questions. Oftentimes when I'm praying and you join the salah late, and when you sit down and the congregation is on its final tashahhud, but we are not. After the attahiyat, can we keep reading all the du'as and the durood and all of that, just like everybody else, despite the fact that we will be standing up again?
Repeat the question, dear.
Okay, so I joined the Salah late, and when the congregation sits down for the final tashahhud, it's actually my second rakah. So, or even it's my first rakah or the third rakah. And so I read the attahiyat. Do I keep reading the durood and the other duas that are normally read in the last tashahhud, despite the fact that I will be standing up
Oh,
again?
I see what you're saying. Okay, so do you read okay. So if you're basically joining late, okay, you basically join along with them Okay, so you do the actual dhikr that you would be doing in that rak'ah, okay, even though it's probably your first rak'ah.
Right.
All right?
No, but I'm asking in the tashahhud, you know, when we're sitting at the tashahhud,
You would say
they are,
tashahhud.
yeah, I will say the tashahhud, but can I also say the durood and the other du'as that I normally say when I'm sitting down for my final tashahhud, although I will be standing up again? Is that okay?
Let me research that one and see what the preponderant is.
Okay, that would be great. And also, when we are doing our second tashahhud in a 4 rakah salah, and we do the attahiyat, and we well, your finger is raised or straight. After one is done reading the attahiyat, but the imam hasn't said Allahu Akbar, do we keep our fingers straight or raised until he says Allahu Akbar, or do we lower it?
Oh, that's a huge debate between scholars on how long you should keep your finger up while your index, that is. One, and how long, and do we just do it during Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, or is it throughout the whole thing? It's a huge debate between scholars, so I wouldn't really be so particular on that.
Okay, so I was talking about the middle one when we're doing a 4 rakah salah.
Same
So I
thing.
read
There's a huge
same
debate
thing.
on that. Yep, same thing.
So one could do either or.
Yes.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan.
Oh, okay. وإياكم. This is it, inshallah, everybody. We'll
Oh,
see you.
sorry, Dr. Aisha.
Go ahead,
Not so
dear.
fast. I have one question.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So my question is regarding the salat that we just discussed. So I think the period of the salat should be when the eclipse starts up until the end of the eclipse. So what
Yes.
if it's a very short eclipse? Does that
Yeah,
mean they will
that's what
shorten
we
the
were
prayer?
saying. Right. So that's what we were saying before, with Ibn Taymiyyah basically telling us, well, there's sometimes you can have a long eclipse and sometimes a little shorter eclipse. So depending on the time lapse and depending on how long the eclipse is basically happening, that's going to determine the length of the prayer.
Yeah, okay. So another one that happened recently, I think it was we had an eclipse last year in Canada and went to the masjid, and the time for I think Asr prayers also I don't it's everything was just mixed up together with the eclipse prayer. So some were saying we had to complete I think we were on the second rakah of the eclipse prayer when Asr prayers then came in. So then the Imam shortened the eclipse prayer so we could do the Fard prayers. And then people were like, no, you're supposed to like complete that one since it's a once in a lifetime, once in a blah 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 thingy. So like in that situation, like who was right?
So basically, anyways, with the eclipse prayer, just the eclipse, okay? Keeping in mind that Asr is dependent on the sun anyways. All right? Is dependent on the sun anyways. Meaning not based on the clock in the normal days and the timing on the normal days. Because the sun is your dalil, your evidence right there. So if let's say Asr is at 3 p.m., okay? And Maghrib is at 7 p.m. Let's just assume, okay? Or 6 p.m., whatever, okay? Now the sun is going to be your dalil. So the eclipse would basically be that sign for you to let you know what the sun's situation is. Okay, so but at the end is that if you would have a fard contradictory in its timing to sunnah, we would do al-farida muqaddama ala sunnah. Al-farida basically is prior in its importance over the sunnah. All right?
Yeah, that's clear. I think that was the
Right.
argument that day as well. People were like, it's because of the sun. Asr, it's actually time for Asr yet because you can't actually see the sun. I'm like, oh. But anyways, we know it's time for Asr.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
people were just arguing.
yeah.
So
There's something called الواجب المضيق and الواجب الموسع. Okay. الواجب المضيق is when you have a very tight window. Okay. To do that particular prayer or that particular obligation. Okay, it's a small window, so not too long. So if they haven't enough time to do Asr, then continue the eclipse prayer and do Asr, as long as it doesn't go into the makruh time. Okay, but if there's no time, then in that situation, do Salat al-Fard and make sure that you would do Faridah, because that is prior and more important than the voluntary prayer. Is it clear now, dear?
very clear.
All right, inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. We will inshallah continue next week with Salat al-Istisqa. It's actually a different salah. Is it true that we would wear our clothes inside out for Salat al-Istisqa? Is that real? Is that even a sunnah? Or is that some kind of legend? Stay tuned for Salat al-Istisqa and find out more.